and I shall hand the floor over to you.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for having me back again. I really enjoyed the last lecture I gave about pronouns, and there's going to be a bit of a recap on this lecture about gender and gender diversity, just so you get a sort of like understanding of what we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to just share my screen and bring up the first slide. Can everyone see that okay? That's good, yeah. That's good, so yeah. Pink or blue, the socialisation of gender. It's a really interesting topic that I'm actually going to be writing a research paper on. So I thought this is really good for me to be looking at it and sharing with you, and sharing thoughts with you, and also for you to share your thoughts with me, because we're going to be stopping sort of like halfway through, and I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd really be interested in your thoughts on that as well. So it's LGBTQ plus History Month, and this lecture forms part of the History Month. So we'll be talking about the LGBTQ Pride flag or flags, and we'll also be talking about the pink and blue socialisation of gender and the colours as well that we see sort of all around us at the moment in regard to sort of the binaries, male and female. So we're going to have a look at gender definition, sort of quick recap on what that is, and then we're going to look at the history of pink and blue clothing for young children. So going back, with show you some examples of like art history and things that you may remember as well when you were children or when you were bringing up your own children. Then we're going to have a look at the social construct and performativity. So some academic dialogue on why this is happening, why is pink and blue, what's the theory behind it. And then we're going to have a quick break, and I'm going to be asking you some questions. And then after that, we'll have a look at the LGBTQ Pride colours and what those colours symbolise and what they mean. And I've also got some resources and further reading for you. So if you're really interested in this subject, you can read about it further. And then we have our usual Q&A session at the end. So what is gender? So gender is about identity and expression of individuals. So it's not necessarily about a sex, so male or female. It's actually about how people identify themselves. So they can identify themselves internally as how they feel about themselves. So they could feel male, or they could feel female, or they could feel a combination of both, or neither. Because we're looking at this sort of like continuum or a spectrum of how you feel. And the other way gender can be expressed is externally. So people, or individuals, can present themselves in a certain way. So with their clothing or hair or mannerisms. So we call that the sort of external expression. And then a few other terms is like sexual orientation. So sexual orientation is how you are attracted to someone physically. And then you have the sex, which is the anatomy, the physical anatomy. And I've got a diagram I'm going to show you. It's called the gender-bred person. And this is quite a simple way to understand how gender is represented. And it's all about in the academic terms. So it's on the outside here, on the left, you've got expression. So that's externally how someone expresses themselves. Then internally, you have identity up here in terms of the brain and how people feel. And then orientation, sexual orientation, you have the heart. So it's how you attracted to someone. Are you attracted to men, women, male, female, or not attracted to anybody? Then we have the physical, the sex. So we're looking at the anatomy, the biology here. So that's quite an easy way to remember it. So if we look at the history of pink and blue, the colours that are used throughout history, when we're doing this, because we are surrounded at the moment with these pink for girls and blue for boys, we have that sort of like lived experience of a certain amount of bias when we're looking at these images. So although you're looking at the images, you may automatically think, well, why is that baby wearing blue, pink? Why is that? That's not right, you know. But you've got to think about, well, you are seeing images around you that are affecting how you feel about different images that you're going to be seeing. So it'll be interesting to discuss that further when we have our break. So the history of pink and blue. In the Middle Ages, there are a lot of images of Mary, the Madonna, with blue. And from this image here, which is from 1390, Italian, Lippo di Dalmazio, this cloak here is actually blue, but it's faded over time because it was made from, let me just check my notes, it was made from azurite. So the pigment azurite, compared to ultramarine, azurite faded over time. So this would have been really bright blue when it was first painted. So we're looking at the blue for female, and then we're looking at the red here. This is Christ, red for Christ. So it's totally the opposite of what we see today. And if you look at the symbolism of this, blue represented purity, divine, virtue, and then the red represented lots of different things, but you could say that it represented martyrdom and Christ's blood. So we see the red of the baby here. And another example we have of in the Middle Ages is the Virgin Child here, again in a red outfit, and Mary in blue. And this time it's a much brighter blue because it's been made out of a different type of pigment. And this is the 1400s. And these collections, if you're interested in looking at art, if you go to the National Gallery website, you can actually go and search all their collections, and you can see all the images of their paintings if you're interested in doing that. The reason behind the symbolism of pink and blue and where it originally came from is all in the Middle Ages anyway, is related to these four humours. And I know that, I think it was last year we had a lecture about the four humours. I don't know whether you can think back to that lecture, and it was talking about these four elements, the air, earth, fire and water, and these represented different colours and the different elements. So we're looking at air, which is at the top here, and then you're looking at fire, which is represented by red, which is blood, it is hot. And if you look at the inner circle here, you can see manhood is on the inner circle near red. And if we have a look over at blue, we have that represents water, and it represents the area for blue. So it's cold and it's wet, whereas fire is hot and it's warm. So we're looking at Christ being warmth, it's the fire. And so all the colours that were used at that time were related to these four humours. And that was the same with anything that we're talking about, the medicine and the body. There's a really interesting book by an academic at University of East Anglia, and it's called Medieval Bodies. I don't know whether anyone's come across this. It's by Jack Hartnell, and that's a really interesting read, and that talks all about the body and the different the humours and the elements in the body as well. So if we're moving on to the 1600s, we come across these very elaborate clothing here that people wore. And we have a Dutch painter called Johannes Cornelius Vespronk. And you can see we've got a pink outfit with a blue cloak. So we don't have the gender pink and blue norms as we see today. And then also, if we move on, we have by the same artist, 1641, a young girl in a blue dress. And this is an interesting one. This is American folk art. about 1840, and it's from the Honolulu Museum of Art. And this is a boy in a pink dress. So we're looking at pink being used for boys and for girls. There's no sort of like discrimination. We're also looking at dresses. Dresses were worn by boys and girls. It was sort of like a gender neutral, really. Everyone wore dresses up until the age of about 6 or 7. And also the majority of young children wore white. So this is an example of someone who had been quite wealthy because they could afford to have a colour, but most young children would have worn white. And the reason for that is because it was easy to clean, and if there was marks on it, you could just bleach it. So you didn't have any of this pink for boys, pink for girls, and blue for boys when the children were born. It was all sort of like very sort of gender neutral colours. Another example is the Victorians. This is a Victorian birthday card. So on this card, you can see that the little girl is in a blue dress and the boy is in a red sort of romper suit here. So again, there's no discrimination between these colours being fixed in terms of who wears what. It's just a depiction of a Victorian card. And you can see those role reversal colours there. And 1800 to 1900, we're looking at Franklin Roosevelt here. So you might look at that today and think, oh, that's not Franklin Roosevelt, that must be a girl. You know, she's got little shoes on, patent leather shoes, got a white dress on and long hair. But at that time, the girls and the boys wore very similar clothes and outfits, so you'll say it was very gender neutral. But if we're looking at this now, because we've had all the exposure to the different colours that we're seeing today in the shops and what babies are wearing, we look at this and it doesn't necessarily sit right with us. You say, well, that can't be right. But this is what was happening in the 1800s to the 1900s. So it's interesting to think about what, you know, why did this suddenly change? What happened? Why colours? And it's not just in clothing, but it's in toys, isn't it? Children's toys, even like the Disney Princess, Frozen, and all these type of films that young children look at on television. They're very much role related and related to the binaries. We have a look at, I contacted Pollock's Toy Museum. I think we had a lecture about Pollock's, which was last summer, and some of you may have been attended that lecture. And if people don't like looking at dolls, then sort of look away. But I contacted them and was talking about the use of gender-based clothing for dolls. And Debbie Brown, who's a curator there, said that most dolls were just dressed in the traditional long white clothes, like you can see in this image here. So there was no sort of like pink or blue. And she said that there's a few male dolls, and there's a baby doll called Doreen, and Doreen dates from the 1930s, and Doreen is dressed in a pink knitted outfit. Unfortunately, I don't have a photograph of Doreen, but it's interesting that the dolls that the children played with also replicated what the children were wearing at that time. When we move on to the 1900s, it's interesting to have a look at what's happening in America, because in 1927, in the Time magazine, we have a short piece about clothing for boys and girls, and the idea is like pink for a boy, because pink was usually used for boys and blue was used for girls. And there's a table at the bottom here showing what type of what areas, geographical areas in America, and what colours were used. So this is in 1927, so it's after the First World War. So we're looking at, you've got Manhattan, you've got the different department stores here. And also at that time in America, there were these magazines or trade magazines that were sent out to all the houses and residents, and people could order things in these catalogues. So here we're saying in Manhattan, at best, pink was usually used for boys, and girls had blue clothing. And at Macy's, it was blue for boys and pink for girls. Then if we're looking down here, Los Angeles, it was blue for boys, pink for girls. New Orleans, pink for boys, blue for girls. So there's a lot of differences here. There's no sort of set colour for boys or for girls. There's a mixture of it, and that was 1927. So you can see that we're looking through the ages of the history, and we haven't really come to any decision as to what colour boys or girls should wear. We're up to sort of 1927. So if we move forward to like the 1960s and 1970s, I don't know whether some of you here, do you remember these type of patterns? Because I remember as a child, my mum used to make a lot of our clothes because we couldn't really afford to go and buy clothes, and also it wasn't the availability of clothes that we find these days in places like Primark or Next. And so this is examples of some patterns, and you see these sort of gender neutral romper suits. And then again in the 1970s, which is on the left here, you've got these again sort of gender neutral trouser suits, and we have the blue or red or yellow. But in the 1960s and 70s, those of you that remember making these outfits for your own children, 60s and 70s was the introduction of the second wave feminism. So you had people like Betty Friedan, who wrote The Feminine Mystique, and they were talking about freedom and emancipation of women getting out of the house and being able to work, and not having to stay at home and behind the kitchen sink. And it was all about very much about freedom and emancipation. And these clothes, sort of gender neutral clothes, sort of reflected what was happening in society at that time. So it's interesting to associate that with what was happening in feminism. And then it sort of made me think, well, what's happened now? I mean, we're sort of like where feminism has moved along further in terms of equality. But we seem to have gone and started using things like the nappies, for example, disposable nappies. We've got the boys' nappies and the girls' nappies, and these were introduced in sort of like the 1990s, like Pampers. So you can see the boys' nappies have got sort of like things like that on, and the girls' nappies have got teddy bears in pink. So we started to see this in the 1990s, and this wasn't related to feminism at all, because the feminism at that time certainly wasn't restricted to trying to make women go down in certain roles. So the feminine way, women staying at home and not working, it was very much in terms of feminism, it was more advanced. It was people wanting to be equal rather than just women being equal. It was everyone being equal and looking at how society can be equal as a whole. So 1990s were when we start looking at these colours being introduced, the pink and the blue for boys and girls. And then when we look at today, so in 2022, there was something recently in the news, I don't know whether you saw it, about Primark, and it said Primark were being accused of selling hugely sexist kids' clothes. And these are some examples of the clothes that they had on their website. So, for example, you had a girl's sweatshirt in pink and it said dream, okay, and you have a boy's sweatshirt in blue and it says fearless. So if you think about those words, fearless is a bold, it's an active word, whereas dream is, if you think of a girl, are you telling a girl that they can dream, but they can never actually do anything? They just got to sit there and dream about it. Whereas a boy, you're saying to them, oh, you're fearless, you can do anything you want in life. And then If you look down the bottom here, we have never hold back. This is a boys t-shirt. So saying to boys, you're fearless, don't hold back. You can do anything you want to. Whereas girls, you can dream about it. You can smile, you can be bright and happy and have a lovely smile on your face. But, you know, you need to hold back. You're a girl, you wear pink, and that's how you are. You're not like boys. You can play with pink clothes, Barbie dolls, and anything that's pink. You can watch Princess and Frozen Disney films, but remember, you're a girl. So as long as you smile, everyone will like you. And it's like, this is 2022, and I find that we seem to have sort of reverted and gone back to a period where women didn't have equality, and it's interesting to find out whether this is just being accepted as normal, or whether this is something that people are going to be starting to talk about or discuss, and also challenging. So in response to this, Primark said that there's a broad range of styles across their kids' clothing, and they're catering for mixed tastes. And they said in recent times they've removed gender-specific labels. However, I don't feel that these are gender neutral, these clothing that is on here. And they're also saying that they're always learning, so we welcome customer feedback. So it's good that they welcome customer feedback, but these items are still on their website. I also had a look at Next, and they have got similar items on their website as well. And then I had a walk around Norwich the other week and took some photographs in different shops, like baby shops. And again, there was a whole section of boys' baby clothes in blue, girls' baby clothes in pink. So it's quite striking that this is evident today, whereas I certainly don't remember it when I was younger, or even when I was bringing up my children. There's also something else that's started in the 2000s that has come across from America, and they're called baby gender reveal parties. I don't know whether anyone's heard about these, but what the Americans do, and what is coming over into this country as well, is that before a baby's born, the parents will have a scan done, and they're told what sex the baby is. So they will then have a party, invite all their friends and families before the baby's born, and do a big surprise party with the colours representing the gender of their baby. But their friends and family have to guess what sex it is. And if they guess right, you have these things like these. There's blue feathers here that are all coming out of a box. So it's a really big thing in America, these gender reveal parties. And when I first heard about gender reveal, I thought, oh, that's a nice idea. I thought it was about people being able to talk about their gender in terms of LGBTQ. And I thought, oh, that's a lovely idea to have like a gender reveal party. And then I realised, oh, no, it's not. It's actually people having a party before the baby's born and actually determining the colours, the colours of this binary, male, female, pink, blue, of this baby before the baby's even born. So I wanted to ask you, and this is where Fiona's going to pop in and ask some, just pause for a moment. I want to ask you all, why do you think colours have changed to the pink and blue stereotypes that we see today? Because it's only very recent this has happened. And some of you may remember back to when you had your children or grandchildren, and I certainly remember as a child and having my children that it didn't seem to be so extreme as it is now. So I'm going to, shall I stop sharing, Fiona?
Yeah, stop sharing for a little minute, and if people want to put their comments and what they think the answer is to that question into the chat, we can talk through some of them. So we'll give you a little minute to do that.
So why do you think these colours have changed to the pink and blue? They used to be fairly gender neutral colours for young children and babies. So why do you think this might have changed?
Okay, so right, a few comments coming in now. Power of the media, Barbies. It's all to do with marketing. Yep. A lot of the comments that are coming in is around the actual marketing. Not sure why a girl can't buy a blue top or vice versa. Surely no difference. E.g. no buttons doing up opposite sides as in shirts. Because you do see that, don't you?
Yes.
The buttons and zips and things.
I think marketing is a really good point.
Yeah.
And I'll come on to that in the next slide.
Easier to categorize for consumeristic purposes. Yeah. Yeah. It seems to be marketing and advertising. So does that kind of accord with your thoughts on it, Rachel?
Yes, yeah, pink fairies on TV, yes. And also, if you think about, if someone in the chat has talked about knitting baby clothes, and it was all very gender neutral colours like lemon and white and cream. And also, do some of you remember making clothes for your children using those patterns that were, again, sort of gender neutral? And we're sort of talking about, we've got here commercialism.
When is it? There's just a quick question here that we could maybe answer now, since we're talking about this. Just a very, very quick question from Anna Alexander. You said it was quite recently that this pink and blue binary thing came along. When roughly was that? 1990s, or was it earlier than that, do you think?
It came over from America, so it started in the 1990s in America, and then it then moved over to this country. So we were talking about, mentioned about the nappies, about the Pampers nappies. We have girls' nappies and boys' nappies with the different colours on them. I didn't use disposable nappies. I used cloth nappies, and they were just like white. So. But it's about I suppose selling more nappies. That they said, oh, the girls' nappies are different because they've got a different padded area to the boys' nappies. I thought, well, when you use cloth nappies, it's all exactly the same. And then so yes, it started 1990s in America and then moved over here. And as we're seeing now in sort of like the 2020s, we're seeing these gender reveal parties, which are again a sort of like American thing that's come over. But bear in mind that we are talking about Western culture. We're only talking about Western culture with these colours in terms of the babies and the young children. It's Western culture alone.
Yeah, there's a few people saying about, the reason I was asking that is there's a few people saying about kind of remembering the pink and blue thing from a bit earlier than that, in the 50s and 60s, perhaps.
It may have been a bit earlier, but the research I've done said it was mostly in the 1990s, because in the 50s and 60s there were more gender neutral colours, and the babies, a lot of babies would just wear sort of like white, or a lot of knitted clothes which would be white and lemon. And also in the 1970s, when there was that pushback against what had been happening in the 50s with women told to stay at home and not work, then we have this very much sort of like gender neutral clothing as well, and the young girls and children wearing trouser suits.
Yeah, just trying to see if there's any other interesting comments. We've got lots of comments, which obviously I'll pass on to you afterwards, Rachel.
I just, there's a comment there by Jill Arnold about there's no evidence that children naturally favour one colour. Well, when babies are born, then they don't favour a colour because they don't have any choice what they're put in, do they? And so the same with young babies and young children. Their clothes are bought by their parents, and their parents or grandparents will dress them in certain clothing, so they don't really have a choice. But if would they favour one colour or the other? Well, because they're surrounded by these colours, and I'll go on to talk about that now. It's all right if I just share my screen.
Sure, of course. Thanks very much for all your comments, folks. We'll certainly be taking these away afterwards.
I'll just share my screen, and hopefully everyone can see that. So when we're talking about will children naturally favour different colours? The theory behind this is all about gender social construction. So when a baby is born, they don't have any favourite colours, so they're put in colours by their parents, by their clothing, and it's the way that parents will treat the children as well in terms of the words that they're using and the descriptions and the toys that they buy. So I think lots of people mentioned about consumerism, and the pink and blue consumerism is in fact reinforcing and imposing this binary. And it seems to be going backwards rather than being progressive and looking forward. And it's normalising gender as a binary construction. So we are talking about gender roles being created or constructed by a society. So when you're born, you don't have any preference over your gender role, but you see everything. A young baby sees what's happening around it and it absorbs everything. And then so it sees, young children will see their peers wearing pink if girls, and the boys will see the boys wearing blue with slogans on their t-shirts saying fearless and things like that. So it's about what happens in society, and it's about this performativity and this construction of what people can see. And so we have a well-known academic, Judith Butler, who wrote in 1990 that we act in ways that consolidate the impression of being a man or being a woman. So when you're born, you can be born male or female, but you don't start to express yourself as male or female. It's all about what happens around you and what the environment's like as to how you express yourself. And then we have Iris Marion Young in 1980 wrote a book about throwing like a girl. And she said that girls are physically inhibited, confined, positioned and objectified. So we're looking at when babies are born, they start going through their preschool, they see what they watch television, they're bought clothes that they're wearing, and they automatically assume that they can dream and they can smile and they can look pretty because that's what they should be doing. That's what's acceptable by society. I'm not saying this happens to all parents do this, but it's what we see around us all the time. Jo Paoletti in 2012 has written a book all about this pink and blue, and she said that it could have gone the other way. So when we're looking at sort of like the 1990s, it could have gone the other way. So there's no logical rationale for why there was this colour shift and why children are continuing to use white. But then white isn't these days. It's not a very practical colour for young children and babies to wear. So that's probably why white wasn't continued to be used. But there are other colours, like green, yellow. But yeah, Jo has written, she's another academic, has written articles and books about it. So there's no logical reason for this to happen, which is why I sort of like pose that question to you to see whether you can think about why you think there might have been a reason for it. And I can see that most of you are saying that there's a lot about consumerism because if things are selling as a pink bicycle will be sold for young girls, then there's more pink bicycles. As soon as a young girl sees a pink bicycle, they'll say, oh, I want that, because they're being used to, they're wearing pink, their clothes are pink, they're saying smile, be happy, they want a pink Barbie bicycle. And then the same with the boys. If they're seeing, so if you look in a toy shop and you have a look at the Lego, most of the Lego is, although obviously any child can play with Lego, but when you look at the Lego on the shelf, you have, as soon as it gets to sort of like girls' Lego, it's all pink, and you've got houses and you've got dolls in the houses, and there shouldn't, I don't feel there should be any reason why should it all be pink. I mean, we look outside and we don't see pink houses, do we? The houses are brown, they've got thatched roofs, or they're white. We don't see that. We don't see pink houses. Whereas when you look at the Lego for Star Wars, for example, it's the actual colours that are in the film, which is like the greys and the browns. So these academics are talking about how the gender roles are constructed. So they're constructed by society, by us, by consumers. So we're all to blame really for what is happening at the moment. I'm going to move on to the LGBTQ pride colours and the symbolism that's represented here. So the LGBTQ pride, as we're in LGBTQ History Month at the moment, each of these colours represents a certain element, and the Pride rainbow flag was again designed in the US, came over from the US by Gilbert Baker in 1978, and it's a symbol for the LGBT community. So we have the rainbow colours starting with the red that represents life, and then you have the orange healing, you have the sunlight of the yellow, and then you have nature, which is green, you've got peace, blue, and spirit, which is the violet or purple. So thinking about these colours, if you go back to what I was talking about earlier in this lecture, we were talking about the Madonna and Child, and Madonna was nearly always represented with blue, a blue cloak, and so blue represents peace. And then we're talking about the red, which in some cases, which Christ was wearing red, we're talking about life. So if we're looking at these colours here in the rainbow, it's also we can go back in time to the history and the symbolisation of colours, and right back to those 4 humours to see how these colours are now used sort of present day. So the rainbow in history has symbolised harmony, it's hope. So when you have Noah's Ark, they see this rainbow and it's a sign of hope that there's going to be land on the horizon. So it's like dreams, hope. It's a promise of a better future and new beginnings as well. But it's also meant to represent solidarity and equality. So this flag came over from America in 1978, but since then, I don't know whether some of you are aware, but we have a new flag, which first started in 2018, and then in 2021 it was altered slightly. So we have this new flag, and it's called the Pride Progress flag, and this has additional symbolism added to the first LGBTQ plus flag. So we have the colours on the right hand side here, which are the same as the previous slide, but also we have the black and the brown colours here in an arrow, which represent people of colour. Then we have the blue and the pink and the white here, which represent trans. And then we also have this yellow triangle with the purple oval shape here, which represents intersex. So those of you who are not familiar with intersex is neither male or female. It sort of sits in the middle there. So in terms of biology, someone who's intersex can have female and male biological organs. So the flag that most people might see now is this new flag, which you've got an arrow here, which as you can see, the point of the black and the brown arrow pointing to the right, and this represents progression and moving forward. And in 2021, this was designed, this new flag here with the intersex section was designed by Valentino Vecchietti, and the Pride Progress flag was Daniel Quasar. So I'm going to give you some quotes from Daniel for the reasons why the flag changed. So what he was saying is that the arrow points to the right to show sort of like a forward movement and to illustrate progress. And more progress still needs to be made. And he also says that this new design forces the viewer to reflect on their own feelings towards the original Pride flag. So a lot of us are used to seeing this rainbow colours of the original Pride flag, but the LGBTQ plus community are looking more outwards and being more inclusive by adding people of colour and trans people, and then intersex as well. So the original pride flag has been developed further. And so Daniel's saying that there's different opinions on what the flag really means, but it needs to bring it into clear focus about the current needs within our community. So we're talking about currently, it's 2021, 2022, about what society, this is again is in Western culture, society in Western culture and what it represents. I've got some slides here with some resources on for you. So there's a really good website called the LGBTQ History Month. So if you want to find out more about LGBTQ plus history, it's a really good website to go to. There's the article there about the Primark and the sexist kids' clothes. And there's also Stonewall that you can go to and find some information about LGBTQ. There's some further reading. So I've got some books here, and I know that Fiona is going to make the presentation available. So there's some further reading there, some books like I was talking about Butler and Hartnell and Young as well, Throwing Like a Girl. So if you're interested in reading more about the theories behind this, then there's some further reading to do. And there are also some courses that I'm doing coming up at the weekend. So on Saturday, we have start the conversation using gender neutral pronouns, which some of you might have been attended for one of the lectures. And then on the Sunday, we've got the pink or blue. It's in although I'll be including some of the material from this lecture, it'll be more discussion based. There'll be lots of opportunities for discussion in that lecture. And then in March, I've got Policing the Woman's Body, Subjugation, Oppression and Politicization, which will be an interesting topic. So I've got those ones coming up. And just moving on to Q&A open question time. I'm going to pass over to Fiona, and I'd just like to say thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm looking forward to Fiona having a look at the chat here to answer some of your questions. So I'm just going to stop sharing. Is that all right, Fiona?
Yep, that's absolutely fine. Thanks very much for that, Rachel. That was really interesting. Right, I'm going to just launch into some questions. I need to scroll up because we've had lots and lots of comments, which is fantastic. Now, let me see. I'm just going to sort of start from the top, basically. Right, bear with me, everybody. Right, it was a question from Mike, and it's when you were sort of talking about the history of the sort of colours. He's asking, why is it all about pink and blue? Did people never wear other colours?
Yeah, people wore other colours. If you look at, I'm talking about sort of like babies and young children.
Mm.
So prior to sort of like the 1990s, general lots of different colours were used, sort of more gender neutral colours, but it's not until recently that this pink and blue has been more dominant as colours for male and female young children. And it's just interesting to find out why this is the case, considering we think that we're more progressive. We look at the pride flag and we're really progressive. We've added extra colours to the pride flag to show how inclusive we are, whereas we're going backwards, a step backwards in terms of how we're dressing our children, and how we're talking to our children and what toys they're playing with and what they're watching on television.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, a question from Jane. It's when you were talking about those patterns that you got, you know, those sort of kids, the patterns, and you could still see the girls in blue. I think it was going back into the 50s and 60s. Could the blue have been denim, which I guess is unisex?
Yeah, denim is unisex, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
And there's also denim, it can be other colours, can't it? Rather than blue, it can be black. And yeah.
Okay. A question from Sue, actually. This is a really interesting one. what is the norm in other cultures? And Diana Harvey was also asking, you know, a similar question. What about in the Far East, for example? How do we see these kinds of this kind of binary kind of pink and blue thing happening in other cultures?
We don't tend to see this as much, which is why I emphasize this is sort of Western culture, because we're talking about consumerism as well, and the Western capitalist culture for consumerism. And if you look at the Far East, if you look at Afghanistan as an example, the women in Afghanistan often wear well, the most popular colour is black, and then you can also see the dark blue, and it's a totally different culture to the Western culture in terms of what is available to buy in the shops, what is available for clothing, what's available for books, and what's available for toys. We think we have a choice, we have a big choice, but if you go to your local, is it Jojo Mammon Baby? I think that's who they are, and go in there and want to buy something for like a grandchild, you just got in front of you, you just got the pink and blue. You think, well, I don't want pink and blue, I just want something gender neutral. You don't have a lot of choice. So we think we've got choice, but we haven't actually. And I think that's something that we need to do. We need to change that. We need to challenge that.
Okay. A question from Sylvia. Now, this is talking about the pride flag and the recent change to the flag. Sylvia's asking, why did the flag need to be amended? The words life, healing, etc. cover people of every colour and religion, surely. Does it need to be explained or expanded?
That's an interesting question, because the pride flag was created in the 1970s. And if you think back about feminism in the 1970s, 60s and 70s was predominantly white women. If you look at Greenham Common, it was white women. So what the Pride movement has looked at and reflected on is that they don't want to be represented as white Western pride. It got to include everybody regardless of who they are. So which is why we have those additional colours, and it's reflected in what we do in society today as well, in Western society.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, now we've got a little bit of time here. Noreen was actually asking whether you could maybe say a little bit about gender neutral pronouns just now, because we've probably got some people on the lecture today that weren't around on the previous one that you did on this. I don't know whether you can maybe talk a little bit about the gender neutral pronouns that we have now.
Yeah, gender inclusive pronouns are sort of they and them. So if you, I mean, for my my name in Zoom, for example, I've put my pronouns, which are she and her, which are the pronouns that I use. And so some people may not use those pronouns. They may use they and them. And if you see someone, especially if you're in a Zoom session and you see someone has got they, them pronouns, it means they want to be identified as gender neutral, and they don't want to be referred to as he or she. They want to be referred to as they. So it's about respecting someone's identity and being so respectful and kind to everybody. And you might find that you come across more people now in the media who refer to their identity as they or them. So it's something that a lot of young people are questioning at the moment as well. So the figures are that 1 in 10 young people identify as gender neutral in terms of they, them pronouns. So it's something that you would be could come across perhaps with your children or grandchildren, and it's something that you can have a discussion with without feeling that you aren't you don't have the knowledge, or you're not aware or haven't heard of these the pronouns before.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm just trying to find another. Well, it wasn't so much a question, it was more a comment that I thought was really interesting. Hold on one second. Yeah, this was a comment from Lorinda. Lorinda, I hope that you don't mind me mentioning this one. It's coming back to sort of gender stereotypes. There is the theory that the phrase "boys don't cry" have led to many issues with mental well-being and the high levels of suicide in men, especially young men. It's not manly to express emotions. I don't know if you've got any thoughts around that.
Yeah, well, I remember when my oldest was at school, and I had there was something happened at the primary school, and I had to go in and I had a discussion with the head teacher, and he just said to me, "Oh, boys will be boys." And I sort of looked at him and I thought, what are you talking about? Boys will be boys. And I just thought, what's such an awful thing to say? Oh, it's an excuse. Boys can go and fight and bully each other, and because they're boys, whereas girls can be girls, so that they wouldn't be allowed to do that type of thing in the playground. So it's excusing the behaviour. So yes, it is. There's a lot of people still think like that. So people think that if you show kindness or you show feelings, that's a sign of weakness. And that's where I was coming to when I was talking about the Primark clothing and the male and female stereotypes on there, and the wordings that are used on that clothing. For boys, for example, be brave, fearless, and girls smile and be kind. So, I mean, hopefully the people that are here now, when you're thinking, next time you're thinking about buying clothes for your children or your grandchildren, you'll look online at Primark or Next, or when you go into the shop, you think, I'm not going to buy pink, I'm not going to buy blue, I'm going to buy something neutral, and they're not going to have, all these words on it, like the pink smile. Or you're going to have a look for a really good t-shirt that's got a tractor on and it's green, and you're going to give it to your granddaughter. It's like, do something. You can challenge this as well. And I think it might be, I mean, I haven't got to that situation in life where I've got grandchildren, but I'm just thinking, when I have grandchildren, and perhaps daughter-in-law dresses the child in baby pink all the time, I would probably find it quite difficult I would intervene, but then I'd probably be told that I'm interfering. So it's quite difficult, isn't it? Because you can, like when the grandchildren come to you, you can dress them in what you think is appropriate. But when they go home, then it's quite a different story. And then you could end up in a few arguments with family. But I think you do have to challenge these binaries, and you have to think about the welfare of the children as well. And the girls need to be brave, and they need to be fearless just as much as the boys.
Yeah. Well, it's like my little niece, my 2-year-old niece, she wears her big brother's hand-me-downs. So
yes, yeah.
Now we've got another comment here because we've still got a few minutes. This is from Louisa. There's huge gender stereotyping in ways that restrict people of both sexes. Wouldn't the trans conflicts be so much less if we weren't so binary in the first place? Interesting comment.
Yeah, sorry, I was looking at the chat. Can you repeat that, please, Fiona?
Yeah, sorry. Louisa was saying there's huge gender stereotyping in ways that restrict people of both sexes. Wouldn't the trans conflicts be so much less if we weren't so binary in the first place?
Yeah, that is true, and that's what we're trying to work towards in terms of our Western culture and society, especially with the example of that pride flag. But you've got to think about, we're very fortunate in this country and in the Western society. There's other countries across the world that don't have that freedom. And for example, we've got the Winter Olympics at the moment in China, and our athletes have been told, do not talk about anything regarding gender or anything contentious. And the same if any sports are happening in Russia, then again, you have to be really careful. Athletes have to be really careful about what they say and how they act, which it shouldn't have to be like that. But that's how it is globally. So we have to think about, we're really fortunate to be in society where we do have that freedom, but we don't, on the other hand, we don't want to fall into that consumerism trap of saying that our young girls are have got to be kind and all touchy-feely, whereas our young boys aren't allowed to do that. They aren't allowed to cry because it's not manly. So we need to be thinking about what we're doing as well in a Western society, not to fall into that trap.
Okay, now let me see if there's anything else that's coming a little bit later. No, I think we've got through most things. We've got lots and lots of comments for you. Hang on, let me just read this.
Yeah, I was looking at this one about family bakers. Oh, I'd love to do research on family bakers, because I'd have to try all the cakes as well, you see.
Yeah.
If I did a PhD for 7 years, I would be eating a lot of cakes to taste them all. So would a pink cake taste different to a blue cake, I wonder?
Yeah, but it's quite an interesting point that Norman's making there, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yeah. Yeah, they are gendered, but wouldn't that be the case if you are asking a baker to create a cake for your daughter's birthday, you would tell them what colours you want, wouldn't you? And when you go to the supermarket, you wouldn't buy one that's got pink on it. You'd buy something that's chocolate, chocolate covered. So it's up to you in that sense what you ask the baker to create for you.
Yeah, might be useful for research though.
Yes, it would. Yeah.
Before. Okay, let's have a look just to see. Yeah, this is an interesting comment from Val. When children are in school, the opinions of siblings affect children and what they feel comfortable wearing. Interesting point there.
I think that,
I suppose they're peers as well.
Yeah, it's a good point about schools, because a school uniform, it has changed a bit over the last few years, but it's still very much in terms of that binary. The boys, for example, won't be encouraged to wear skirts to school, and the young girls can wear skirts and they can wear trousers, but the boys aren't allowed to wear skirts. And there was a case, I think it was last year, the year before, where some of the boys in the high school came into school in dresses and skirts, didn't they? And they were told to go home and change. And then another example in schools is PE kits. If you notice that the PE kits for boys and girls, they don't wear the same. And also in terms of what activities they do in PE, you'll notice in high schools, in primary schools, they mostly do the same activities, but in high school, it's still the fact that girls will be doing netball, trampolining, and then boys will be doing football, rugby. And then if girls want to do football, they can, but it's an extracurricular activity.
Yeah, and another interesting point here actually, and obviously quite relevant to myself, in Scotland we have men in kilts, so yes. Yeah, so
there's no reason why
effectively a skirt.
Yes, there's no reason why men can't wear skirts. Exactly. But they don't. You don't see many men wearing skirts because it's not accepted, is it? Socially, it's not accepted. If you wear a kilt, like when you go to a wedding, a man wears a kilt, that's accepted socially because it's a kilt. But otherwise it wouldn't be.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there, folks. Thanks very much, everybody, for all the lots and lots of comments that you've sent in. I'll make sure that Rachel gets all of these tomorrow. So I'm just going to stop our recording now.